Hey everybody, Nick here, and today, well, I got something a little bit different. You see, on my channel, most of the time, I am looking to find the very best, right? I am trying to find pieces of gear, like, for instance, this TWSBI Eco, which bats way above its price point, which does really good work. I'm trying to find gear that is really amazing in the pocket and forms an excellent everyday companion, like this Machine Era Classic pen. I try to find gear that is aesthetically absolutely wonderful, with touches of machining that just make it an absolute joy to use, like, for instance, this tactile turn bolt action, or just pieces that are absolutely gorgeous, like this little Pelican here given to me by a good friend. All of those things are a wonderful thing, and reasons that something might belong on my channel, but today I'd like to talk to you about the very worst everyday carry pen ever. What's this guy doing here? Actually, this is just fine. No, the very worst everyday carry pen is this little guy right here. This is a glass dip pen. So, first off, though, I want to thank very much my buddy Nick of the past. Nick of the very distant past. I think I picked this guy up in, like, 2000, 2002, someplace in that vicinity. It's been around and in my life for a good long time, but this is a very interesting little pen that is absolutely kind of cool, but also the worst everyday carry option ever. First off, let's do some size comparison. Here it is against your standard Bic Click Stick pen. Here it is against the Machine Era Classic. Here it is against one of my very favorite fountain pens, the TWSBI Eco here. And here it is against a pen I stole from a Hampton Inn, which I've had for actually significantly, well, actually a fair amount of time for that too. But nonetheless, there you go. There's your size comparison. The identity of the maker. I know a bunch of people are going to be asking me, well, Nick, who made it? That is lost to time. I tried to look around. I remember what the website looked like, but I don't remember the name of the person. This was made by a small maker, and by an actual, human here in the U.S., a glass maker of some variety, and it came with a little stand and everything like that. Came with a little case, but the case says nothing on it except box made in China, which is, by the way, a good reminder. Makers, sign your work, do something like that. That way I could actually shout these folks out, but I was unable to find them after actually a pretty extensive search, so that is lost to the time. And then finally, what the heck is this even? How does this work? Well, this is a pen that you dip. So I take it and I put it into this ink here, and I just dip it like that, and then I clean off the sides there. And then what we have here is a fair amount of ink in the flutes of this little glass area here. So I can write. Hey, everybody, Nick here. And as you see, over time, it does tend to run out of ink, and that's a thing. And, the various angles and whatnot change. But nonetheless, this is how this guy works. This is how this pen functions. So let's go on ahead and talk about the good and the bad, because this is going to be a quick review of this very interesting little pen right here. So on the good side, to start off with, I have to say, it is a piece of some aesthetic gorgeousness, right? There is a lot of joy to this guy here, and I am a big fan of that. I mean, with this little twisty spiral in here, that can be quite nice, and, I think overall, it's a beautiful aesthetic piece. And next thing on this guy, I have to say that there are no moving parts here. And the lack of moving parts can be reassuring. It means that there's really nothing it's not too hard to clean or anything like that. All you do is you just take it and you run some water over it, and bam, it's clean. There's no problem. There's no cleaning it out. There's no special soaps required. It's literally just a piece of glass. So that's good. It is also very light and beautifully balanced in the hand. We can measure this guy up here when I find my scale around here someplace or another. Here we go. We'll put this on the scale, and we will see that this is 0.6 ounces, which is, something nice. There is, one of the nice things about this guy is that you actually get a surprisingly long writing time with this guy. See, but I'll simulate that just by writing, and I'll make, a series of dashes here, but you can do a fair amount of writing before you run out of, ink with this guy. Because remember, you can always rotate it a little bit and change the flutes that you're using. And so as a result, by doing so, you can make a whole bunch of different lines here. I mean, it is not the case, for instance, that especially with like calligraphic dip pens, that is, the little kind of metal nib numbers that you see online, or in craft stores, for instance, if you frequent craft stores. I don't know how many of you do, but those tend to run out of ink very, very quickly. I probably should have just been writing something, that way you'd have a better sense, but I'm just going to keep making dashes here. And what you see here is actually that there is a gradient here, and that's part of the reason I went with the dash route here. Because, you start off with a line that is very thick, that's very bold, that's very wet, and then over time it slowly, there we go, see? And then you switch to a new flute, and then you can use that. But over time, you get these shifts in and out of saturation, where, especially if you're using an ink that's kind of reasonable, like this guy, this is Urban Inks, Harbin ink bottle, and you get a fair amount of gradients in there, and so you end up actually being able to write a fair amount with this guy. And so I appreciate that very, very much, and, so that's that. Next thing, you are able to use any ink with this guy, and that's actually kind of important, right? And by the way, you see that the ink is actually fading down, slowly down to the tip of the pen as you use it more and more and more. But anyways, you can use any ink with this guy. Unlike a lot of pens, which will require you to use a very specific kind of ink, for instance, a fountain pen ink or something like that, and other kinds of inks will tend to clog up or have trouble. This can use anything. Literally any liquid that can flow via capillary action is going to work just fine in this, guys. You can use things like India ink, which are not... India ink is a bad idea to use in a normal pen because it's got particulates in it. You can use other kinds of pigmented inks that would absolutely not work with a general fountain pen, or that would just clog them up like crazy. And so that is a very nice thing. Aesthetically speaking, this is a very nice piece, 100%. I very much appreciate the aesthetics on it here. And overall, you know what? It is perhaps... it's a throwback. It adds a certain level of consciousness and slowness to a writing process, and for some people I can see that, especially for things like journaling. This could be something that brings you a little bit of joy, right? And so, to me, at least, all of that is the good here, is that it's nicely balanced in the hand. It's a beautiful aesthetic piece. There are no moving parts. You can use literally any liquid as ink. I could probably just, pour out some EDCI and use that as ink in this guy. Saturation, I don't think would be great, but nonetheless, you have surprisingly long writing times with this guy, particularly with a little bit of rotation there. The aesthetics of it are nice. By the way, cleaning it off, very easy. Like I said, I'll probably use some water after this review is done to wash the worst of it off. But still, now at this point in time, it's relatively clean there. And it is, a very nice and interesting way to go about taking your notes. On the bad side, there are definitely some downsides to this. One of them is, well, frankly... it's a little fragile, right? And in fact, this guy initially, I got the head of this guy replaced at one point in time, fell off my desk, because this is a pen that just kind of rolls and rolls and rolls. There's a reason they include a little stand with it, and that's so you can, do that, right? But this guy has a tendency to roll away, and if it does happen to drop, you break the glass, and if you happen to break the glass, even the very tip here, you're going to have a bad time. It's no longer going to write. And so, there is definitely fragility there. I mean, you can put it in your pocket once, and I wouldn't recommend that, generally speaking. So there's that. Next thing, you are absolutely going to need to be okay with the fact that this is going to mold your writing style a little bit. Like I said, you have a certain amount of time that you can write with this, and then you have to re-dip again. And so as a result, you'll end up with this aesthetic of where it starts very dark and very bold, and then it slowly peters out, and then maybe you rotate the pen, gets a little darker, gets a little bolder. Some might say it's a compelling look, but it's absolutely going to be much less uniform than a good old-fashioned fountain pen. For instance, like the TWSBI Eco here, which is going to use roughly the same color each line. There's not really a whole lot of variation there. You can do variation. You can add additional, if you add a little bit of curve, add a little extra pressure, you can make it darker or lighter, but you're going to have that natural variation in there. Next thing, this guy is, let's just put it this way. In terms of portability, it's not great, and the biggest reason for that is because in addition to having the pen, which, by the way, you can't just toss in your pocket after you're done, you have to actually wash it off, but you need to have a bottle of ink nearby, right? And can you imagine the kinds of look, I'm okay with being a bit of a hipster, right? This is something I've come to terms with in my life. But can you imagine sitting down at a coffee shop? I mean, right now I can't imagine that anyways, but that's beside the point. Could you imagine sitting down at a coffee shop, taking out your glass pen stand, your jar of ink, and then proceeding to take notes with a glass dip pen? That is the most hipster thing I can even frankly imagine being an occurrence, right? This is a super, super, super hipster thing. Or maybe even not even hipster, but this could also be like art kid or Renaissance Festival person. You are nonetheless going to get some entertaining looks, and although I certainly get those already, I mean, the Batman mask helps, right? But nonetheless, you are going to absolutely need that. So there is that. Next thing, these are going to be a little pricier. Look, like I said, the original maker of this guy, and frankly, the original price of this guy was lost to his hands at time. This might have even, I'm trying to remember where I got the original one. I might have picked it up at a Renaissance festival because I am a nerd, okay? Just saying. But nonetheless, I don't know what the exact cost of this guy would be, but I'm looking around on the internet in preparation for this review. And I'm seeing that there are a bunch of different possibilities, and they range from, on the cheapest of the cheap end, about like $20, to up to, I think the most expensive one I saw was like a matching set with an ink bottle, and that, got up closer to 200, but it was also beautiful, like blown glass sort of work. You're supporting an artist and whatever. Not a big deal, but you're definitely going to pay a little bit more, and especially given that you can get a good internally filled fountain pen for, $20-30. You're definitely paying a little extra cash there. And then finally, on the bad side, there is definitely some variation to how the tips are ground here, because remember, the ink needs to contact, basically these little flutes on the side of it, though the end of that flute needs to contact the paper where you're writing for the ink to flow out via capillary action. That's how this whole thing is working. And as a result, if that's not working right, if it doesn't perfectly touch down at the bottom, it's not going to write as well. And in fact, like I said, I distinctly remember that I had broken this guy, and then I sent it back, and they just refitted a new tip on the end of it there, and they did charge some, small amount of money for it. It was a good experience, which is why I regret not having the person's name. But nonetheless, afterwards, when I got it back, it just didn't write as well. It turned out to be a little bit grittier and whatnot, and it's very possible that I could actually try and refine that with some kind of a polishing or another. Glass workers listening in, let me know how to go, but nonetheless, that's definitely, you're going to have a lot of variance there. And if this glass is scratchy at the front there, it's high hardness, so it's not like it's ever going to wear away. So there were definitely some downsides there. So to me, at least, all of that is the baddies that you're going to have to be dealing with, let's put it this way, it'll shape your sentence structures a little bit, and it'll make sure that you have a little bit more variation, which could be to your aesthetic or not necessarily. It requires a dipping bottle nearby, making it the most hipstery possible way to write in a public. It is definitely fragile. It is a little bit on the pricey side. And although it is absolutely beautiful, practicality-wise, not so up there. Final conclusion, this is the absolute worst everyday carry fountain pen ever. Because although it is light and beautiful in the hand, with no moving parts, using any ink, with surprisingly long writing time, nice aesthetics, and all, it gives you a little bit of a contemplative air, so to speak. This would be so dumb to use around out and about in your daily life. I mean, if you are a crafter, if you are using an ink, and that is the biggest advantage to this, you can use any ink that you would like, any liquid, basically, that you would like that will flow via capillary action here, thin it down to the right, you can write with it. And so that makes this a more possible sense, along with other kind of similar flavors of calligraphy pen, that makes this a little bit more compelling in those cases. But for everyday life, abso-freaking-lutely not. The reason, though, that I decided to do this is not only because it amused me and because I found it and it's a pen and I should review pens, but more importantly because it's a little bit of a reminder that the everyday carry community is great, but we also have these sets of constraints, right? We have these ideas that constrain the design space. We need it to be pocketable. We need it to be internally inked. We need all of these things, and although very often those are really the best, and I try to really think very carefully about, is this constraint that I have a real thing? If I go outside the box, will that be better or worse? In this case, for everyday carry, yeah, going outside that box was bad. But that said, it could be that this is a perfectly good pen for somebody in a very specific circumstance, and it could be that it's the very best option for some. So anyways, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Figured I'd throw up a video about it, and there you go. I wish I had the name of the artist still. If you happen to know the name of the artist, please leave it down in the comments. But for the most part, I hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.